I'm glad we're able to move things along so well in this contract between your firm and my city agency.
And I thank you. I'm just sorry we had a schedule so late in the day.
Will there be anything else?
Just a check, please. Oh, I'll get this. I can just expense it. See, we have an account with this restaurant. Here's where we bring all our big clients.
Well, thank you very much for dinner. And have a happy holiday. And I'll be in touch with you when we get your bids back.
Great. Oh, and speaking of the holidays, here's just a little gift from my company to you for all the great work you've been doing. It's just a couple of Knicks tickets.
Wow. And these are really good seats, too. My wife's going to be thrilled.
Welcome to It's a Question of Ethics. I'm your host, Susan Miller. For the next half hour, we'll be reviewing situations, like in the reenactment we just saw, in which a public servant is dealing with a conflict of interest in his or her city job. I will be talking with attorneys from New York City's Conflicts of Interest Board about the city's conflict of interest law and some of the ethics rules that city employees should be made aware of. Some common questions that we'll try to answer are, can I accept dinner from someone that I'm doing business with? Can I accept another job, or will that be a conflict of interest? And also, can I accept a gift from a vendor that I'm working with? With me now are Mark Davies, Executive Director and Counsel for New York City's Conflict of Interest Board, and Hugh Weinberg, Deputy Counsel of the Board. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
City employees, as public servants, have a special obligation to the public in terms of trust and integrity. The public expects a lot from them. One of the most common situations where a question of ethics may arise involves accepting gifts. In our reenactment, a city worker whose work involves dealing with vendors has his dinner paid for by a vendor and is also given tickets to a sporting event. I guess that you're going to tell us that this would be a conflict of interest. Mark, could you just tell us a little bit about what the rules are in regard to accepting gifts?
Well, Susan, the basic rule is that a city employee may not accept a gift worth $50 or more from any person or firm that city employee knows is either doing business or intends to do business with the city. Here in this reenactment, we see two potential problems that you mentioned. First of all, the dinner, fancy restaurant, almost certainly worth more than $50. And secondly, the Knicks tickets, great seats, also worth more than $50. Now, there are exceptions to this rule. Maybe Hugh can give us some idea of what those are.
Mark's right. There are exceptions to the rule. For example, a city employee may accept meals or even reimbursement for travel expenses when the meals or the travel are conducted in the course of city business or for a city purpose. An example of this would be if a business meeting where city employees are present runs over into mealtime and the company or firm orders in lunch and pays for it, that would be appropriate. However, in the reenactment we've just seen, a fancy dinner at a fancy restaurant, there doesn't appear to be any real city purpose for that, and that would be prohibited by the board's rules. Even more so would be the tickets to the sporting event where there is clearly no city purpose.
So basically what you're saying is that there are two rules which city employees should be made aware of regarding accepting gifts. The first is that a city employee may not accept a gift $50 or more. And also the second is that city agencies may have rules that are stricter than what the agency board has the board has laid out. Is that correct?
That's correct, Susan. The bottom line is that gifts are a very sensitive area. It is easy for a city employee to get into trouble with respect to accepting gifts. And any time that someone who does business with the city offers a gift to a city employee, that employee's antenna should go up and he or she should contact either his agency or the Conflicts of Interest Board for guidance with respect to accepting that gift.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Conflicts of interest can occur in outside activities that city employees may be involved in, like working for not-for-profit organizations or moonlighting. In this next reenactment, A secretary at a city agency has a moonlighting job in the evenings, doing secretarial work for a supply company.
Sorry I'm late, but I had to work overtime at my other job, and I missed my bus.
That's okay. I understand how it is working for the city. Especially now, since the new budgets are due out next week.
Yeah, I'll say.
Listen, I need this paperwork completed and sent out tonight. So when you're done typing it up, fax it to the numbers on the top. There's a couple of big contracts there.
Oh, good. I hope we get them. Let me take a minute to get situated, and I'll get right on it for you.
I'd appreciate that. Well, I'll leave you alone so you can get started.
Okay. Acme Furniture. Okay. New York Telephone. Wow, that's a big one. J-Can Computer Suppliers. New York City Department of Weights and Measures. Hey, I'm familiar with this agency. My city agency has dealt with them before. They're a big group. Oh, you know? I wonder if I should be seeing this. I mean, I don't really have any influence on the bids we prepare here. I just fill in our prices and type them up. I don't really work for that city agency. But I do work for the city. And I do know people at Weights and Measures.
I'm back with Mark and Hugh of New York City's Conflicts of Interest Board. We've just seen a reenactment on moonlighting. Many people do have a second job. Hugh, what were some of the conflicts of interest here that may arise?
Well, first let me just say that a city employee is not prohibited from having a second job or part-time employment in his or her spare time. However, there are certain restrictions. For example, in the reenactment we've just seen, the city employee works for a firm that has business dealings with the city. That would be prohibited by the city's conflicts of interest rules, and that's regardless of whether the business dealings that the private firm has are with the city employee's own agency or any other city agency. Now, it is possible to obtain a waiver from the Conflicts of Interest Board and to be allowed to hold this position. In order to do that, the city employee must go to his or her agency head and obtain the agency head's approval. And then secondarily, the city employee must obtain the approval of the board to hold that position.
Susan, there's probably some other points we should mention here. First of all, the city employee must do this outside employment on his or her own time, not on city time. Secondly, the city employee can never use city equipment for this outside employment. Also, of course, the city employee can never use his or her city position to obtain a private advantage for herself or himself or for the outside employer. And lastly, the city employee can never use confidential information obtained as a result of the city employment for a non-city purpose.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There are many conflicts of interest rules, and we can't possibly discuss them all in this half hour. So to give us a brief overview on some of the areas where these rules may apply, let's take a look at this short clip. We'll elaborate on them afterwards. As a city employee, you should be aware of the rules surrounding the city's conflict of interest law. While they are explained more fully in the city's charter, here are a few basic points to remember. First, let us state that city workers are prohibited from using their official city position for personal gain or private advantage. It is also important to note that private use of confidential information gained as a result of city employment is also forbidden. Be aware that the Conflicts of Interest law does impose limits on political activity. A city employee is free to engage in most political activities, such as contributing money or working on a campaign. However, a city employee cannot try to coerce anyone or even request a subordinate to work in a political campaign, donate money to a candidate, or participate in other political activities. The basic rule to remember is that city employees cannot use their position to induce support of political activity. High-level officials may be subject to stricter rules. A city employee may work for a not-for-profit organization for pay or as a volunteer, but there are restrictions involved, particularly if the not-for-profit organization has business dealings with the city. City workers may find themselves challenged by a situation involving a conflict of interest. The bottom line becomes a question of ethics. If you're a city employee and you have a question about the Conflicts of Interest law, please call the New York City Conflicts of Interest Board at 212-442-1400. Joining us is Joanne Fry, Deputy Director and an attorney at New York City's Conflicts of Interest Board. Joanne, one of the areas which pose potential conflicts is when employees work for not-for-profit organizations. Could you elaborate on some of those conflicts?
Certainly, Susan. The first thing I'd like to point out is that city employees are not prohibited from engaging in volunteer work with not-for-profit organizations. And in fact, many city employees are involved in volunteer work. However, if a city employee is considering doing volunteer work with a not-for-profit organization that has business dealings with the city, there are a number of things they must consider. First, they cannot be paid for working for the not-for-profit organization. Second, they must do it on their own time, not city time. Third, if the not-for-profit organization is engaged in business dealings with the city employee cannot be involved in that either directly or indirectly. And finally, if the not-for-profit organization is engaged in business dealings with their agency, the employee is not prohibited, is not allowed to do that volunteer work unless they have the approval of their agency head.
Also, Susan, we should probably mention there is another important rule in the Conflicts of Interest law, and that is the prohibition against a city employee using his or her position, her city position, for private advantage. For example, in the last reenactment, the secretary could not use her position with the city in order to obtain a private advantage for herself or for her outside employer. Also, a city employee may not use city letterhead for a non-city purpose. A city employee may not use city equipment for a non-city purpose or city supplies. And of course, a city employee may never use another city worker to do non-city business.
The Conflict of Interest law also contains rules regarding post-employment restrictions. In this next reenactment, an architect employed by the city is overseeing the work of a private contractor on the construction of a city office building.
But you got the modifications. Great. Any problems incorporating them? Oh, great. Great. Yes, well, I thought that making those changes would increase the efficiency of the staff using those particular offices. Great. Great. So, I'm glad things are going so well. Yes. Great. All right, I'll be in touch. And give me a call if you need anything else. Yes. Great. What? Oh, I've been here with the city. Let's see now, it's 7 years this July. Well, thank you. I'm glad you like my work. I try to do my best at whatever I'm doing. No, I am not the head of this department, but I am in charge of this project, and it is the biggest project we have currently. No, not at all. I love working for the city. Of course, they don't pay what the private sector pays, but that's okay. Work for you? You must be kidding. I couldn't. What? At twice my current salary? Oh, look, I really appreciate this, but 3 times? Oh, my. Next Thursday? Yes, I think I can make it in for an interview. Your board of directors? They like my work? Well, thank you. Okay, then, it's next Thursday, 10 o'clock. I'll be there. Great. And thank you, Mr. Trumpet. I'll see you next Thursday. Wow. It's great. It's just great. I love it. You wouldn't believe the projects I'm working on. I have 3 full-time architects reporting to me. No, I don't get to plan and design the way I used to, but I still love it. Uh-oh. It's the intercom. It's probably my boss. Look, I'll call you back later, okay? Okay, bye. Yes, David. Of course I remember the city contract. I wrote it when I worked there, remember? It was only 7 months ago. Oh, in fact, when you called, I was on the phone with one of my old co-workers. I see. Well, are they aware of the cost overruns? Oh, so they've got the contract modifications in hand already. Well, I don't see that this is a All right. I see. Well, couldn't we hold off a little? I mean, this is the city, and they have such a lot of rules. Yes, I still talk to my former boss on occasion. We go out to eat lunch or something. You want me to mention this to him? I don't see what good it would do, but... You want me to ask him to release the money? But this isn't my project. Well, yes, but he's going to ask me questions. I mean, I wrote the original contract, of course, but it's been a long time, and I'm sure there have been many changes made to it. So I really... I see. All right, I'll look through the files and see if I can come up with something.
What was the conflict that occurred in the last reenactment? The architect left her city job and went to work for the private sector, but she maintained her contacts. Joanne, why would this be a problem?
Well, Susan, let me first point out that city employees frequently take other jobs in the private sector, and there's really no problem with that. However, there are many things that they must consider when contemplating a career move. First, a city employee is not allowed to work on a specific project for the new private employer that they worked on while they were employed by the city. We saw an example of this in the reenactment. In the reenactment, the new private employer asked the former city employee to contact her former agency about a contract that she had worked on while employed by the city. This would be something that is prohibited. And in fact, an employee, a former city employee, may not do that for the rest of their life. There's also another potential conflict that was highlighted in the reenactment. The former city employee was asked to contact her former city agency 7 months after she left the city. No city employee who has left the city is allowed to contact their agency or appear before their agency before 1 year after the termination of their city service. And appear would mean making phone calls, writing letters, having appointments, that kind of thing. That doesn't mean, of course, that you can't call up a friend that you used to work with and have lunch or see them after work. But if it involves anything involving substantive city matters, you can't appear before the expiration of a year.
And Susan, there's another possible problem here, and that is when a city employee negotiates for a job with a firm that is working on the same project or the same matter that the city employee is also working on. And they're not allowed to do that. What they have to do in that case is the city employee has to get himself or herself taken off that project for the city before, and that's the important point, before negotiating with the firm for that possible job. Here, for example, what the architect should have done when she was approached by this firm for a possible job, she should have contacted her supervisor, said, you know, I've been approached by this firm for a possible job. I'm interested, and so I'd like to be taken off this project. If she would have done that, it would have been fine.
Thank you. It's about time to wrap things up. I'd like to thank our guests from New York City's Conflicts of Interest Board, Mark Davies, Joanne Fry, and Hugh Weinberg. If you're a New York City employee and have questions about the Conflicts of Interest law, please call the New York City Conflicts of Interest Board at 212-442-1400. Again, that's 212-442-1400. If you have a complaint about the ethical conduct of a New York City official or employee, please contact the Conflicts of Interest Board or the New York City Department of Investigation. I hope you've gained insight into the city's Conflicts of Interest law, which can be found in Chapter 68 of the City Charter. However, it needs to be stated that these rules are the bottom line and that stricter ones may apply in your particular agency. Remember that in order for the public to maintain confidence in city workers, the city must ensure not only that its employees act fairly and impartially, but also that their actions appear fair and impartial as well. Thanks for joining us. For Crosswalks Television, I'm Susan Miller.